Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into a stack of sources today that, honestly, they read less like reality and more like, I don't know, the script of a psychological thriller.
Oh, absolutely. It's a completely bizarre collection of documents.
Right. We've got classified forensic photographs, architectural blueprints for a billionaire's custom skyscraper penthouse, chemical autopsy reports, and, get this, acoustic data logs recovered from a blood-soaked smartwatch.
It is intensely detailed, and our mission today is to decode case file #151 redacted, the ascending crimson.
Yeah, but here is the catch for today's deep dive. You, listening to this right now, you are not just a passive audience member today. We are putting you right in the middle of it.
Exactly. You have to assume you are a detective decoding this mysterious crime scene.
Yes, you are walking into an active, entirely inexplicable crime scene. And you have to rely entirely on the physics, the engineering, and the bizarre forensic clues in front of you to solve what seems, at least at first glance, to be a completely impossible murder.
It really is the ultimate locked room mystery, and it's escalated to a scale we rarely see in forensic science.
No kidding. So to solve it, we have to meticulously dismantle the environment, variable by variable. We have to figure out how someone literally weaponized the fundamental laws of nature to commit a crime that, frankly, shouldn't be physically possible.
Right. Let's set the scene for you, detective.
Okay, yes, picture this. You arrive at a towering skyscraper in the heart of the city. The main elevators are entirely down, which is a point we will dissect shortly, so you have just climbed the final, exhausting flight of emergency stairs.
Sounds exhausting.
Oh, definitely. You push open the heavy security doors and step into a space known as the Aether Observatory.
And according to the architectural schematics in our sources, this is a breathtaking, custom-built glass and steel VIP lounge.
Yeah, perched at the absolute pinnacle of the building. It was designed specifically for the world's financial and technological elite to sit back in absolute luxury and watch a highly anticipated meteor shower that occurred that very night.
The physical space itself acts as, well, almost like a psychological profile of the victim.
How so?
Well, by choosing to build a glass observatory at the apex of a city, the victim physically isolated himself from the rest of humanity. He situated himself above the weather, above the noise, in a fortress of structural elevation and extreme wealth.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And lying dead in the absolute center of this magnificent room is the owner of that fortress, the CEO of a massive, heavily scrutinized tech conglomerate.
So as the detective, you approach the body.
Right. And the preliminary coroner's report in our stack notes, a single, incredibly precise puncture wound to the side of his neck. But here is the visual that completely breaks your brain the second you cross the threshold of that room.
Room is completely silent.
Exactly. The observatory is in total dead silence. The only sound is the victim's smartwatch, still strapped to his wrist, just screaming a continuous high-pitched alarm into the quiet air.
And then there is the blood.
The blood. This is the anomaly that just defies basic investigative logic. The blood is not pooling on the floor beneath the body. It is floating.
Floating?
Yeah. The crime scene photos show the victim's blood suspended in perfect spherical droplets, drifting upward toward the ceiling, collecting there like a horrific miniature red galaxy.
It's unbelievable. You walk into a crime scene and gravity simply isn't applying to the primary evidence.
Right. When a detective encounters a scenario that violently contradicts the established architecture of reality, the immediate instinct might be disbelief. I mean, my first thought was a zero-gravity chamber or a movie set.
Sure, but every anomaly leaves a fingerprint. The sources we are examining prove this is not a hallucination, nor is it a digital manipulation of the evidence.
It is a meticulously engineered, industrial-grade trap. Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because before we can even begin to analyze that floating blood, standard investigative procedure dictates we have to secure the perimeter.
Exactly. We need to analyze the entry points and the environmental anomalies to understand the boundaries of the crime scene.
So the structural blueprints of the Aether Observatory reveal the first massive hurdle. This room is essentially a biometric vault.
Right. It utilizes state-of-the-art security protocols. The main entry doors are sealed with multi-factor biometric locks requiring retinal and fingerprint scans.
Scans that only the CEO possessed, by the way.
Yes. Furthermore, the room is hermetically sealed. There are no traditional HVAC air vents. It relies on an internal, closed-loop atmospheric scrubbing system.
And crucially, the forensic report states the door was mechanically locked from the inside. The lock was engaged, the deadbolts were thrown. So no one came in and no one went out.
We have a perfectly sealed, impenetrable glass box.
Exactly. Now, when your visual senses are completely overwhelmed by the impossible sight of floating blood, a good detective naturally shifts to their other senses to ground themselves in the environment.
And the olfactory evidence detailed in the initial crime scene log is incredibly specific. Scent is often the most overlooked forensic tool.
Oh,
Yeah, scent molecules are physical chemical compounds interacting with your olfactory receptors. They tell a story of chemical reactions that have recently occurred in the space.
that's fascinating. Well, the scene log notes a few distinct smells. Underneath the obvious metallic tang of the situation, there's the distinct scent of expensive scotch, which makes sense given the luxury bar in the lounge.
Makes sense.
Then there is the smell of rain-slicked metal drafting in from the wet clothing of the first responders who opened the door. But then there's a third scent. The investigator noted a bizarre, faint smell lingering near the elevator shaft, just outside the observatory.
Ah,
It
yes.
smelled like burnt ginger. Now, my mind immediately tries to rationalize that. Maybe the CEO was drinking a very elaborate cocktail with a flamed ginger garnish, or maybe the cleaning crew uses a highly specific artisanal botanical cleaner.
That is a logical deduction for a normal environment, absolutely. But the chemical residue analysis in our sources points to something deeply incongruous with a luxury lounge.
Okay, what is it?
That specific burnt ginger aroma is not culinary. It is the signature chemical byproduct of a rare, highly specialized organometallic binder used in military-grade thermite.
Wait, thermite. Okay, I know thermite is essentially a mixture of metal powder and metal oxide that, when ignited, creates an exothermic reaction that burns unimaginably hot. We're talking thousands of degrees.
Exactly. Hot enough to melt straight through a solid engine block.
So, precisely the kind of thermal energy required to compromise heavy industrial steel.
Yes. And the engineering report on the building's infrastructure indicates this thermite wasn't deployed inside the observatory itself.
Right, it was outside.
It was strategically placed and ignited on a specific critical mechanical governor component of the skyscraper's primary elevator system, situated just below the penthouse level.
Which perfectly explains why our hypothetical detective had to take the stairs and why the first responders were delayed. The elevator was deliberately catastrophically sabotaged. But this brings up a massive logistical question for me. If the killer's target is one single individual, sitting alone in a locked biometric vault at the top of a tower, why go through the immense trouble and risk of smuggling thermite into the building, sabotaging the main elevator shaft, and essentially trapping hundreds of other people on the lower floors?
It does seem extreme.
It feels like a bank robber deciding to cut the power to an entire city block just so they can break into one tiny, unmonitored safe deposit box. Isn't it a massive overcomplication?
It seems like overkill until you evaluate the killer's operational requirements. This wasn't merely about isolating the victim. It was about ensuring an environment of absolute, mathematically guaranteed zero interference.
Zero interference, okay.
The execution of this trap required time and precise conditions. The killer could not risk a random variable, like a security guard deciding to do an unannounced patrol, an executive assistant bringing up a late-night document, or even the CEO himself deciding to leave early.
So melting that elevator component with thermite acts as a structural failsafe.
Exactly. It achieves two vital tactical objectives simultaneously. First, it traps the CEO with his fate. It permanently severs his only viable escape route, turning the observatory from a sanctuary into a cage.
And the second objective?
Second, it creates a massive logistical nightmare in the rest of the building. The people below are trapped, confused, and panicking. The building's security teams are entirely occupied with an unprecedented mechanical failure and crowd control.
Oh, wow. So the killer engineered a distraction so massive that it consumed the attention of the entire perimeter, leaving the penthouse completely unmonitored.
Precisely.
It fundamentally changes the nature of the crime. You are physically elevating the victim away from any possibility of help, and you are structurally cutting off the rest of the world to ensure they have to watch the show.
So, as our detective, you have now established the reality of the perimeter.
Right. The room is perfectly sealed from the inside. The building is in a state of chaotic lockdown. The victim is utterly isolated.
Which forces us to confront the next incredibly glaring logical hurdle.
Yeah, if the room was never breached by a person, how did the killer actually inflict the fatal puncture wound to the CEO's neck?
We have a body with a precise, lethal wound, but the perimeter dictates the killer was never physically close enough to hold a weapon.
And this brings us to the double-pane glass paradox. You walk over to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the observatory. They are rated to withstand hurricane-force winds and are perfectly sealed against the severe weather outside.
But upon a microscopic forensic inspection detailed in the case file, investigators found a tiny, almost invisible hole pierced straight through the reinforced glass.
Directly in line with the trajectory of the victim's wound.
And we can immediately rule out standard ballistics. This was not caused by a sniper rifle.
Right, because I would assume a high-velocity bullet hitting double-paned architectural glass would leave a massive spiderweb fracture pattern.
Right.
Even an armor-piercing round would shatter the structural integrity of the pane.
Not to mention, you would find the bullet embedded in the walls or the furniture inside the room.
Exactly. But the crime scene is pristine. No bullet, no glass shards, no impact crater. So if it's not a bullet, and it's not an icicle from the storm, what on earth punches a microscopic, perfectly clean hole through reinforced skyscraper glass and human tissue without leaving a projectile behind?
The engineering analysis confirms it was a high-pressure, abrasive water jet fired from a significant distance outside the building.
Wait, really? Like a factory cutter? Here is where the ingenuity gets genuinely terrifying. We are talking about industrial manufacturing technology, right?
Yes, exactly.
The kind of heavy machinery used in aerospace engineering to slice cleanly through thick plates of titanium or steel, but somehow miniaturized, highly focused, weaponized, and fired across an open expanse of air.
The fluid dynamics involved are staggering. When you take water, mix it with a microabrasive material like crushed garnet, and force it through a tiny orifice, often made of sapphire or diamond, under extreme pressure.
How extreme are we talking?
We're talking upwards of 60 to 90,000 pounds per square inch. The water stream accelerates to speeds exceeding Mach 3. Yes, at that velocity, water ceases to act like a liquid and becomes one of the sharpest, most destructive blades on Earth.
That is wild. But that explains the clean puncture and the lack of a projectile, I guess. The weapon simply evaporated or dispersed as mist after passing through the target.
Correct.
But calculating that shot is mind-bending. The killer had to account for the stagnation pressure of the water stream over a distance, the heavy wind shear from the storm outside, the Coriolis effect, and even the natural sway of the skyscraper itself.
It requires an unbelievable level of precision. But the sheer brilliance of this method isn't just the physics of the cutting power. It is the absolute perfection of the camouflage.
Right. The environment provided the ultimate concealment. Because outside the Aether Observatory, a heavy rainstorm is lashing against the building. The windows are entirely covered in rain-slicked metal, condensation, and thousands of water droplets streaking down the glass.
And the killer designed this high-pressure water jet to look exactly like a rain streak against the window.
It is a masterful manipulation of perception. To the CEO, sitting inside his supposedly impenetrable fortress, looking out at the sky waiting for a meteor shower, there would be no warning whatsoever.
None. No muzzle flash from a rifle, no red dot from a laser sight, no sound of a gunshot breaking the silence.
Just another stream of water joining the countless others on the glass.
Yes.
It is cold, mathematical calculation. The killer literally turned the weather itself into the murder weapon.
By the time the CEO's brain processed that one specific raindrop was moving entirely too fast and perfectly horizontally instead of vertically, it was already too late.
The fatal blow is completely indistinguishable from nature until the exact moment it strikes.
This breakthrough in the investigation forces our detective to face the most visually disturbing element of the crime scene.
Yeah, because we have definitively established the cause of death, the pressurized water jet. We have uncovered the method of delivery, which elegantly bypassed the biometric locks. We understand the thermite lockdown mechanism.
But we still have to address the elephant in the room.
The floating red galaxy, the blood falling upward. We know exactly what killed him, but why is the evidence completely defying gravity?
As an investigator, it is paramount to reject any supernatural or pseudoscientific explanations. We cannot rely on the idea of a ghost story.
Right.
Nor can we assume the killer somehow invented a true anti-gravity field generator and hid it in the ceiling. Such technology does not exist. The answer must lie in applied physics, specifically the behavior of ferrofluids.
Okay, let's break down what a ferrofluid actually is, because this is where the biology of the victim was horrifically compromised. A ferrofluid is essentially a liquid that becomes strongly magnetized when placed in the presence of a magnetic field.
Yes.
Now, human blood naturally contains iron. It's a core component of our hemoglobin, it's what carries oxygen through our bodies. But the iron in normal human blood is not ferromagnetic. You can't stick a magnet to your arm and pull your blood around.
Thankfully, no.
The concentration and the molecular structure are completely wrong to overcome the massive force of gravity.
Which leads to a dark conclusion. The victim's fundamental biology had to be systematically altered prior to the murder.
Altered how?
The toxicology reports from the autopsy confirm this. The forensic analysis shows the CEO's bloodstream was heavily saturated with SBONs. That stands for superparamagnetic iron oxide nanoparticles.
Superparamagnetic iron oxide nanoparticles. How on earth do you get a paranoid, highly secured tech billionaire to ingest massive amounts of microscopic magnets? You don't just sprinkle it on his food.
No, you disguise it as something he actively seeks out and consumes regularly.
The recovered medical records in our source file reveal these nanoparticles were ingeniously hidden inside a bespoke daily health and longevity supplement the CEO was taking.
It is a profound, incredibly intimate violation. These specific nanoparticles are actually used in modern medicine for targeted drug delivery and as contrast agents for MRI scans. They are designed to circulate safely in the blood.
But the killer capitalized on the victim's own routine, his desire for biological optimization and longevity, and turned it into the very mechanism of his spectacular death.
It is the ultimate Trojan horse. Over a period of weeks, maybe even months, the CEO was religiously taking his supplements, slowly and unknowingly turning his entire circulatory system into a highly reactive, magnetically charged fluid.
He was literally carrying the murder weapon inside his own veins. Okay, so the biological trap is set, his blood is primed. It's essentially a liquid magnet waiting for a charge. But what provides the actual pulling force?
The architecture of the room itself.
The room?
Yes, the Aether Observatory wasn't just a viewing lounge. It was a trap meticulously built around this exact physics principle. The structural blueprints reveal that the infrastructure of the floor and the ceiling were secretly lined with an array of high-power electromagnets.
Oh, wow. The analogy that comes to mind is, imagine turning the victim's circulatory system into the ink of a massive macabre etch-a sketch.
That's an apt, if disturbing, comparison.
So the killer installs these massive concealed electromagnets in the ceiling panels. When they are dormant, nothing happens. But the absolute second those magnets are supplied with electrical current, the massive magnetic field cascades through the room.
And the magnetic polarity violently dictates the flow of the iron oxide-laced blood. The pulling force of the electromagnets in the ceiling simply overpowers the gravitational pull of the Earth.
So the blood doesn't just float, it falls upward toward the source of the magnetic field.
It is a breathtaking, terrifying manipulation of physics. The killer did not change the constant of gravity. They simply introduced a stronger, localized electromagnetic force that was calibrated to only affect the victim's altered biology.
Meaning everything else in the room, the glass, the furniture, the CEO's clothing, remains completely grounded. Only the blood responds.
Exactly.
But wait, analyzing this sequence brings up another massive logistical paradox for our detective. We have the physical mechanics of the trap fully understood. We know how the blood floated via the electromagnets and the nanoparticles. We know how the room was locked down with thermite. We know how the puncture was delivered via the water jet. But how was this entire complex system synchronized and activated?
That is the big question.
The killer was not in the room to flip a switch for the magnets, and the high-pressure water jet, fired from the roof across the street, couldn't somehow transmit an electrical signal to turn on the ceiling inside. The room is sealed.
The answer to the activation sequence lies in the digital forensic evidence left at the scene. This is the precise moment where heavy industrial engineering intersects with software manipulation.
Okay, as the detective, you walk over to the victim's tablet, which is resting on a side table near the body. The screen is illuminated. On it, there's a document that reads like a digital suicide note.
But the digital forensics team notes something bizarre. This isn't just a simple text file.
What was it?
The file's metadata reveals it was encoded with a cascading execution script, and the timing of that script perfectly matched the astronomical trajectory of the meteor shower happening outside.
Oh, that is so dark. It introduces a deeply theatrical, almost operatic element to the crime. It demonstrates the killer had an absolute mastery of timing, choosing to utilize a celestial event not just as a visual backdrop, but as the rhythmic metronome for their performance.
Let's read into the specific lines of this digital note, because the language is incredibly revealing.
Yeah, I have it right here. He says, "They think I built an empire on innovation. I built it on a cemetery." And then, a few lines down, "Tonight, that future is coming for me. I'm not being murdered by a person. I'm being murdered by the very physics I stole.
The note serves as a forced confession. It is clearly authored by the killer, but it is psychologically framed as the CEO's final moment of terrifying realization.
And the text explicitly addresses the visual anomaly you were staring at. It reads, "Look at the blood. It's not falling because the world is finally turned upside down for me."
It is poetic, but as a detective, poetry isn't evidence. The most critical part of that digital document isn't the dramatic confession. It's the highly specific instruction written at the very bottom.
Right. Do not open the door until the alarm stops. If you do, the truth will evaporate.
This line is the operational key to decoding the entire room. What alarm is the note referring to?
The acoustic data logs provide the answer. It refers to the victim's smartwatch. The device still attached to the CEO's wrist, screaming in the otherwise silent room.
That high-pitched, continuous alarm piercing the silence.
We initially thought it might be a medical alert, maybe a heart rate monitor flatlining when he was struck by the water jet. But it wasn't a cry for help at all. That smartwatch alarm was the trigger switch for the entire murder room.
Exactly.
But how does a smartwatch alarm activate industrial ceiling magnets?
Through the principle of acoustic resonance and piezoelectric circuitry, we're looking at a highly sophisticated acoustic trigger.
Okay, break that down for me.
The specific sound frequency emitted by that smartwatch, let's say it was programmed to emit exactly 15,000 hertz, a frequency right at the edge of painful human hearing, was the exact resonant frequency required to activate a hidden acoustic sensor wired to the electromagnets.
So it operates on the same physical principle as an opera singer, shattering a wine glass.
Precisely. The singer doesn't break the glass with physical force. They find the precise resonant frequency of the glass and project a sound wave that matches it, causing the glass to vibrate until its structural integrity fails.
Got it. So in this case, the killer installed a sensor in the ceiling that was, like, listening for one specific note.
Yes. When the smartwatch hit that exact frequency, the sound waves physically vibrated a piezoelectric switch, which generated a tiny electrical charge, closing the circuit and flooding the electromagnets with power.
It is a brilliant exploitation of the environment. The room is a biometric vault, sealed tight against physical intrusion and digitally air-gapped from external networks. But sound waves propagate through the air inside the room.
The killer didn't need to hack the building's heavily defended electrical mainframe in real time. They just needed to compromise the victim's personal, wearable device to emit the right frequency at the right moment.
The profound psychological darkness of that mechanism is just staggering. Think about the sequence of events from the victim's perspective.
It's grim.
The CEO is sitting there, watching the sky. Maybe he checks his watch, or maybe an alarm he habitually set himself goes off, or perhaps the killer remotely hacked the watch to trigger the alarm at the exact millisecond the water jet struck his neck.
Either way, the CEO literally triggered his own post-mortem display.
His own watch turned on the magnets that ripped his iron-laced blood upward.
The killer simply had to set the physical parameters and wait for the digital device to beep. It is a locked-room murder committed and controlled entirely by an acoustic sound wave.
And that explains the final warning in the digital note. If you open the door, the truth will evaporate. It's not a metaphor, it's literal physics.
Exactly. If the first responders or the detective break the hermetic seal of the room before the killer's program cycle completes, they introduce a massive change in air pressure from the stairwell.
Oh, and that rush of air disrupts the acoustic resonance of the room.
Yes, the sound waves fail to hit the sensor cleanly, the piezoelectric switch opens, and the electromagnets immediately shut down. The magnetic field collapses, and the floating blood instantly drops to the floor.
Meaning the impossible, gravity-defying crime scene instantly becomes just another messy, standard murder. The killer engineered the room so that this exact, terrifying tableau had to be witnessed in its entirety.
The meticulousness is unparalleled. So, as a lead detective, you have successfully decoded the how. You understand the abrasive water jet, the thermite isolation, the iron oxide biological sabotage, the electromagnetic sealing, and the acoustic resonance trigger.
You have unraveled a terrifying, invisible Rube Goldberg machine.
But knowing how the machine works does not close the case. You have to understand the why and the who.
Right. You have to look for the motive. Why would anyone go to these unbelievable lengths? I mean, if you just want a tech CEO dead, a simple nerve agent in his coffee would have sufficed.
Or a hired sniper with a conventional rifle could have done the job from a mile away.
Exactly. Why construct this incredibly elaborate, highly specific, physics-defying display?
To uncover the motive, the investigation must shift from forensic science to historical intelligence. As you interview the structural engineers and architects who originally built this skyscraper, a recurring rumor surfaces.
They speak in hushed tones about a phantom figure in the engineering community known only as the Architect of Zero.
It sounds like an urban legend.
It does. A ghost story passed around by tired architecture students. But the background dossiers in our source files prove this legend is grounded in a very dark, documented reality.
Decades ago, a brilliant, idiosyncratic inventor, who actually happened to be a graduate student working under the CEO before he built his empire, created a revolutionary technology classified in the files as the magnetic pulse engine.
Based on the redacted patent filings, this magnetic pulse technology appears to have been a paradigm-shifting advancement in electromagnetic levitation, potentially designed for frictionless high-speed transit systems. It was a technology worth billions.
The CEO, recognizing its unprecedented value, engaged in aggressive corporate espionage. He didn't just buy the technology, he systematically stole the patents, buried the original research, and legally claimed the invention as his own.
But in the cutthroat world of corporate tech, intellectual property theft happens every day. The CEO went much further. He didn't just take the tech. He used his immense wealth and legal power to entirely erase the young inventor from the historical record.
The student was financially ruined, blacklisted from every major engineering firm, and left with absolutely nothing.
And the psychological profiles in the dossier indicate the inventor was pushed to the absolute brink. He was left with nothing but the hope of providing for his young daughter's future, a future which the CEO also systematically destroyed through vindictive, protracted litigation.
The inventor was stripped of his legacy, his livelihood, and his family's security. He essentially became a ghost in the machine.
He disappeared from public life, vanishing deep into the anonymous world of industrial engineering and structural design, dedicating the rest of his life to plotting a revenge that precisely matched the mathematical scale of his profound loss.
This brings us to the core concept of this entire crime: scientific retribution. The Architect of Zero didn't just want the CEO to die. As you noted, simple death is too easy.
He wanted a thematic, poetic destruction. He wanted to use the very science that was stolen from him as the instrument of execution.
He constructed a bespoke, structural monument to his own grief.
Look at the symbolism. He wanted the CEO to die looking up at the sky he thought he owned. That Aether Observatory, a glass palace built to look at the stars, was fundamentally built on the stolen foundation of the inventor's genius.
The inventor weaponized the CEO's own sanctuary against him. He vowed, according to a recovered encrypted manifesto, to make the CEO feel the weightlessness of a soul with no ground to stand on.
That is just a staggering synthesis of cold logic and raw emotion. The engineering of the trap is flawlessly detached. The fluid dynamics of the water jet, the molecular chemistry of the thermite, the acoustic resonance calculations, it is all executed with the dispassionate precision of a master physicist.
Yet, the motive driving these calculations is intensely, violently human. It is an execution chamber designed not just to kill, but to force the victim to physically experience the exact psychological sensation of having their foundational reality violently ripped away.
The blood falling upward isn't just a parlor trick to confuse investigators. It is a literal, visual representation of the CEO's world being inverted. He built a massive empire by pushing someone else down into the dirt, so the Architect of Zero ensured that his final dying moment was characterized by being inextricably pulled upward by the exact electromagnetic technology he stole.
It's terrifyingly beautiful in a deeply morbid, almost Shakespearean way.
It forces us, as investigators, to acknowledge a chilling reality. The most sophisticated, cutting-edge technology in the world, capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of nature, is still ultimately driven by the most ancient, primal human impulses.
Greed, betrayal, and the insatiable demand for revenge.
Let's do a final comprehensive reconstruction of the timeline to really cement the sheer dizzying scale of what you, the detective, have just uncovered from these sources.
The operation commences months in advance. The insidious biological preparation. The CEO unknowingly ingesting a daily regimen of superparamagnetic iron oxide nanoparticles, slowly saturating his tissues and heavily magnetizing his own circulatory system.
Then, the night of the highly publicized meteor shower, the physical trap is sprung. The lockdown is initiated via the deployment of the rare organometallic thermite, melting the specific mechanical governor of the elevator gears.
This instantly traps the CEO in his last tower in the sky and creates a chaotic distraction for the hundreds of witnesses trapped below.
The meteor shower itself acts as the ultimate camouflage, providing both a visual and temporal distraction, perfectly masking the approach of the lethal mechanism.
Then, the microscopic breach. The high-pressure abrasive water jet, fired from an adjacent rooftop, perfectly calibrated to account for wind shear and building sway, camouflaged flawlessly as a single fast-moving rain streak.
It pierces the double-pane ballistic glass and strikes the fatal blow before the victim even registers the threat.
And finally, the acoustic trigger. The victim's own smartwatch sounding a programmed alarm, hitting the exact 15,000 hertz resonant frequency required to physically vibrate the piezoelectric switch, closing the circuit, and flooding the concealed ceiling electromagnets with massive electrical power.
Causing the superparamagnetic iron-laced blood to entirely defy gravity, to fall upward toward the ceiling, creating that impossible floating red galaxy.
It is a masterpiece of engineering, brilliantly disguised as a luxury lounge, an inescapable room where the truth will evaporate if you don't play exactly by the killer's acoustic rules.
It is a flawless, mathematically perfect sequence. Every single physical and biological variable was perfectly controlled by the architect of Zero.
It really is. And it leaves you standing in that silent, perfectly sealed room, looking up at that floating blood with a very chilling, lingering thought.
We rely so heavily on the fundamental laws of nature to keep us grounded. We trust that when we drop something, it falls.
The entire investigation forces you to fundamentally question the integrity of the environment you implicitly trust every single day.
Exactly. If a single aggrieved inventor, this architect of Zero, was capable of turning a high-security skyscraper penthouse into an acoustic magnetic execution chamber entirely undetected, well, it forces you to look at the modern world with deep suspicion.
We live in a hyper-connected, physically automated world.
Everything around us is smart. Everything is listening. Our thermostats, our cars, our phones, our watches. What else in our daily seemingly safe environments is just waiting for the exact right sound frequency, the precise acoustic resonance, to turn the very infrastructure we rely on against us?
It's a terrifying prospect.
It really is. As you walk out of the Aether Observatory and head back down those stairs, you have to wonder, when the technology we surround ourselves with can effortlessly manipulate the physics we trust, is gravity really an undeniable constant anymore? Or is it just another system setting waiting quietly to be hacked?